Come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off because today I'm going to review and page through the Shiver role playing game from Parable Games. Is this a great addition to your collection if you're looking to role play your favorite horror movies? Or should you avoid Shiver as you would Michael Myers on Halloween night? Well, you're going to find out right after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Welcome once again to the Duct Tape Studios. I'm Jeff McAleer, your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. As I mentioned in the open, today I am going to review and page through the Shiver role-playing game from Parable Games. It's written by Charlie Menzies and Barney Menzies, with artwork provided by Ben Alexander. This 224-page hardcover is available now. Back cover indicates the MSRP is $49.99. If you're looking just to score the PDF, you can do so over at DriveThruRPG for $22.99. Normally, right now, there is the Halloween sale that's in effect, so you can get the PDF for $18.32 for the next few days. All right, all of that said, let's swing on over to the other camera because here I've got the Shiver role-playing game. First things first, the fine folks over at Parable Games were kind enough to provide me with this review copy, but neither I nor anyone else affiliated with the Gaming Gang has received any other sort of compensation for me to share this review with you. These days, it's important you know that. Also going to be picture in picture up here as always. So that means I'll be cutting off a little bit of the upper left portion of the book as we take a peek through. We're not going to look at each and every page, but I do want to give you a good feel for what's in this core book and share my thoughts about the game with you. Let's begin with production quality. Top notch. This book should hold up to repeated use at your game table. The paperweight is very nice, very solid. Will point out there is a bit of a glossy sheen, and I know some folks don't care for that. Thankfully, we don't have a lot of white on black here. We don't have a lot of white font on black background. It's mostly with this off white here as well. So Shiver is a horror role-playing game, but it tackles all genres of horror. So if you want to role play body horror or cosmic horror, kids on bikes, zombie apocalypse, slasher flicks, you can do so with Shiver. It is relatively rules light, although interestingly enough, when I did a first look video last week on my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, people in chat were commenting that this looked more complex than they had expected. And I pointed out that I thought that this was supposed to be pretty rules light, but it did appear to be a bit more complex. It's not. Although I do recommend that this game is really for more experienced role players and game masters. You don't have to have tons of experience, but this is not the role playing game that I would recommend for people who are completely new to the hobby because you're not going to get the most out of this. So we've got a pretty simple core mechanic, and it is pool based, and we are looking to roll a number of successes to meet or beat a challenge rating. So this game does use custom dice. I know that is a turnoff for some folks out there. There is a die conversion chart in here, although I will point out it's not as intuitive as I would have liked to have seen it. There is an online dice roller, but the other day I went to go check it out and I got an SSL error. Now I checked it out just a few moments ago and it was up. But if I had been somebody who was looking to run a game when I went and took a look at it and I get the SSL error, I would not have been pleased. So keep that in mind. But the set gives you 10 6-siders and 4 8-siders. These are called talent dice. I'll discuss the dice in a second. And the set carries an MSRP of $19.99. They are cut dice, so it's not as if they're silk screened or these are stickers or anything. So these should hold up fairly well. So the base mechanic is a dice pool and rolling successes. So we have core skills. We've got 6 core skills. Most role playing games would refer to this as like attributes, but these are core skills because they actually combine some attributes that we would see in other role playing games. So we've got grit, which is essentially strength, endurance. We have wit, which originally, when I saw that, I thought, oh, it's intelligence. It's not. It's actually like agility, dexterity, smarts. I think that's pretty self explanatory. We have heart, which is kind of your charisma, your fortitude, your ability to persuade people. We have luck. How lucky are you? And then we have strange. So, strange faces are for usually weird archetype characters because the game uses archetypes. So, if you're using magic or supernatural ability you may have, then if you have a skill check, then you're looking to roll strange. So essentially, you'll have as many as 5 dice that would be your core skill. So as an example, let's say I'm a warrior. As a warrior, my core skill that I focus on is grit. So I would get 5 dice and a talent die. Now, there are a lot of different ways for you to increase or decrease the number of dice you get to roll. There are also combined skill checks, which allow you to use 2 core skills. So it would be each of those faces that came up count as a success. This talent die has either 1 star, 2 stars, 1 strange, or 2 strange. So those kind of successes the stars do. Whereas the strange, if you're doing a strange check, thumbs up, right? Good deal. But if you are rolling any other kind of skill check and you fail, these faces are not good. They actually add to what's called the doom clock. I'll talk about that in just a moment. So as an example, let's say I had an average skill check for grit. Maybe I'm trying to loosen a stuck door, and we'll have anywhere from 1 to 5. So 1 is easy, 5 is near impossible. So I would take my 5 core dice that I get because of grit, because I have 5, and then I would take my talent die, and it's like I said, it's average, so that'd be a challenge rating of 2. So I need 2 die faces with the fist or additional successes with the talent die. Hey, and I did it. Look at that. So I would have the 2 grit dice there, and I would also have an additional success. So the additional successes in combat are important because you can score critical hits with additional successes. The GM can also uh, narratively make your success more glorious, I suppose. So you could have a higher level of success. You don't have to play it that way, but I personally would, just to make it a bigger deal that the player got more successes than they needed. Now, if I had failed, then I would have a strange face, and that would actually move the doom clock by a minute. And the doom clock is what's used by the game master to sort of ratchet up the tension, to bring the release of the big bad or the big reveal closer. There are different ways that you tick up the doom clock. There are different ways to tick back the doom clock. So it's, I don't want to say fiddly, but there's a little more to it than I would have expected. And funny enough, I know some folks with the custom dice think it's just a gimmick. Yes, I'm looking at you, Dungeon Crawl Classics. I love you, but come on, do you really need the Zaki dice? Do you really need the Zaki dice? No. The dice are not really a gimmick. The dice work really well the way the mechanics are put together. I think it's very cool. The Doom clock, on the other hand, I think is very gimmicky, especially if you're an experienced game master and know how to run a game and pace a game. Once again, as I mentioned, I don't think this is a great role-playing game for people who don't have a lot of experience with role-playing games because it's very narrative in nature. And usually narrative games tend to work better with more experienced players because players and game masters who don't have a lot of experience usually will approach a game like this as if it were 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. And you are not going to get the most out of this if that is your approach. But as I mentioned, there's a lot of ways to get more dice, to lose dice. You can have advantage, disadvantage. You can have other player characters assisting you. That should give you more dice. You might even get an extra talent die if things are really in your favor. There's also fear. So if you're afraid, you lose a die. If you're terrified, you lose 2 dice. Although there are skill checks for you to be able to overcome your fear. So combat is presented with 2 options. You can do turn-based combat, which a lot of people out there are familiar with or comfortable with. And one aspect of the turn-based combat that I don't think would go over very well with some folks is the initiative. There are no initiative rolls. The players have really nothing to do with initiative outside of what they happen to be doing. Initiative comes down to the game master. So you have essentially 3 ranks: first, second, last. And depending on like the character, what the characters are up to, or what their stance essentially would be, is going to determine when they get to act. So, as an example, let's say my character is that warrior archetype, and I tell the GM that, I'm on the lookout, I'm alert, I'm like, highly focused on something popping out of the darkness. Well, if combat takes place in that situation, I'm probably going to be in that first rank. Whereas maybe I'm distracted or maybe I'm injured. Well, in that case, I'm probably going to go last. So it is up to the game master. Like I said, I could see some players having an issue with that. Now, knowing that, there's also just a free flowing combat. Once again, much more narrative. And you don't really have initiative and what are you doing this turn and things like that. As far as death, there are a couple options there as well. You have basically a lifeline. In fact, what's it called? Let me go back here. Yeah, it is. It's lifeline. For a second, I was like, is that right? It sounds too much like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. So you'll have so many pips that you can kind of cross off, and you'll have different statuses as you take more damage. And one option is you knock off that last little spot. Well, you're dead. That's it. Or for less lethal games, you can have you'll actually make a like luck roll to survive and get a hit point back, but you're still unconscious. Or you could have another character attend to you and possibly stabilize you. But once again, they have to make a skill check for that as well. So Got a couple options there. There's a lot of optional aspects to this game that I really dig. It's not essentially modular, but there are some, like, here we go, like talking about death. And where was it? I think it's back here. There we go. Oh, there we go. Survivor mode, nightmare mode. So we've got that. So the first 27 pages of this book are dedicated to the rules. And that's about it. So when we get into the game master section, the rules are kind of gone into in a little more detail, not all of them, but some. But essentially, if you were a player, 27 pages of rules. That's it. So this is an archetype-based game. And it'll look like there's more character customization here than actually is present. We'll talk about that. So we've got 7 different archetypes. 6 of them all have a core skill that they focus on. The survivor gets just 3 dice and everything. So I don't know why anybody would want to be a survivor, because these other 6 archetypes, including the fool, will actually get 5 dice in one of their core skills and 3 for everything else. So I thought it was kind of odd that I thought maybe the survivor would have 4 and 2, and no, it's just 3 across the board. So of course, here it's showing you exactly which of the core skills do the warrior, the maverick, the scholar, the socialite, the fool, the weird focus on. So let's take a look at it. We're going to utilize, let's go with the maverick just for the heck of it. So the maverick is an agility, dexterity sort of character. So, for example, we've got the paths of the thief, the assassin, and the ranger. So you're going to have what is their strength and what are like weaknesses of this character archetype. We get a breakdown of what are their dice. So as we see with wit, they get the 5 dice and a talent die to roll. We have what is their tier 1 ability, like their level 1 ability, and that is dodge. Discussion of different paths. Now, this is where I'm talking about where it looks like you may have more customization options than you really do. As you can see, we have for different tiers, essentially different levels, we have 3 different special abilities. Well, and that goes up to tier 10. But we also have the tree here, which reminds me quite a lot of like PC and console game role-playing games where when you kind of pick a path, then you're on that path. And sometimes you'll get some options, but every level you gain gets you like a new ability or something like that. And that's what's going on here. So if you pick the assassin, then your first tier is dodge. Everybody gets that if they are the maverick. But if you get, when you're tier 2, that's when you're going to make your decision what path you want to take. So you'd get sneak attack, then light footed, momentum. Then you get +2 to core points, evasive, dual wielder, +1 wit, talent die, silenced, battle dancer. So that's all you would get. So once you've chosen your path, there's really no customization outside of, core points. Well, you choose which 2 you would get. Does that make a big deal with the game itself? Not where I think Shiver shines best. Personally, I think Shiver is really well designed if you are looking to play one-shot horror adventures, maybe what they consider like 2-parters, right? So you'd have one adventure and then its sequel, because there's a very filmatic feel to this game. And it is actually a design philosophy that this is supposed to feel like you're in a movie, not necessarily that this is a long ongoing campaign, even though they have the ability for the characters to advance. That's why we have these different tiers and different abilities. I just don't think that's a strong suit for Shiver. I think it's best for one shots, maybe one shots and sequels or convention games. I think this works really, really well. The rules themselves are easy to pick up on. It's just this is so narrative a game that that's, as I mentioned before, that's one of the reasons why I think you have to be an experienced player to really get the most out of Shiver. And Shiver's got a lot to offer. It really, really does. Now, there is one other customization aspect of your character, and that is a background. So you're going to get some options as far as backgrounds. Oh, look, it's Shaggy for the fool who their luck is their core. So what it's going to do, it's going to give you an additional ability, but it's also going to give you a flaw. And some of the flaws actually advance the doom clock, and some of your strange abilities, use of them actually advances the game clock as well. So that's something to keep in mind. And I do actually like that angle of the design, because then it it makes sure that characters with, you know, magic or supernatural abilities, things like that, don't aren't overpowered compared to the horror movie trope characters. And they also have to kind of juggle, do they use that ability because it's going to advance, you know, closer to the big bad, and the characters not may not be prepared for that. So we get a fairly detailed game master section that breaks down various different parts of the rule book itself. Discussion about the doom clock. The doom clock is an, even though, as I mentioned, it's to me it's gimmicky. And to be honest, the doom clock to me feels like it's something that would come from a GM-less role-playing game or a solo role-playing game, as opposed to a role-playing game that has a game master. So yet again, another reason why I think you need to be an experienced game master to get the most out of this. But there are some examples of uh, things that the doom clock represents. We've got items. We have rules for creating items, building weapons. We've got a bestiary. As you can see, we've got information about creating new enemies. The bestiary is kind of a hodgepodge of all different horror genres, from slasher to werewolves to zombies and vampires. And I I think the broad approach works against Shiver a little bit. That I think it's trying to take on too many genres at one time. So you get little tastes of some things, but you don't get like a deeper dive that you would maybe want to see. So I will point out that there is a Shiver Gothic that's available right now. And at least I know it's available in PDF. And there's also a Kickstarter for a slasher version and a blockbuster film version. I don't know if those are actually core books or if those are supplements, just off the top of my head. So, for an example, like the Shiver Gothic, if that's only focused on like Gothic horror, but it's kind of like the core book, I think that's very cool. But if you already have the core book, you would maybe not want to have a whole nother core book, maybe just a supplement. So, so as you can see, we've got vehicles, character ideas, Doom events, and we actually get a short adventure, which, taking a peek through the adventure, I would think your players will probably knock it out in 2 to 4 hours. We get a breakdown of status effects and an index, and that is Shiver. So let's swing on over to the other cameras so I can provide some final thoughts as well as my review score. So let's address the big picture. Will Shiver replace your go-to horror role-playing game that you currently use? Not if you're looking at doing long-term ongoing campaigns. I just don't see the tools in this book. Yes, I understand we have the character advancement, we've got the trees, we got the abilities. I just don't think there's enough customization here to satisfy most role players these days as far as a long campaign. That said, I think Shiver really shines if you're looking to run one shots, short campaigns where this book would consider it to be the original movie and the sequel, as well as convention games. The rules are easy to grasp. Core mechanic is easy to figure out. There aren't a ton of moving parts, especially for the players. Although this is a very narrative game. And that's one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier that I think you need to have some experience both as a player or as the GM before you jump on into Shiver, because you're going to have a different approach. If you approach this like a 5e D&D game, you're not going to get much out of it. But if you are familiar and comfortable with more of a narrative approach to role-playing games, then this will work very, very well for you. Got to point out there's quite a bit that the game master has to juggle as well, not just with what's going on in the story, but also with the doom clock, with villain and monster or big bad reactions, plus, you know, deciding what advantage dice to give players and maybe with disadvantage, and what die are you going to give them? Are you going to give them a skill die? Going to give them a talent die? There's a lot of juggling actually going on in the game for the game master. I think the presentation is really, really well done. I enjoyed reading it. Do think the broad approach towards horror works against it a little bit because we get some cool bite-sized nuggets, but we never get anything in depth about how do you approach a body horror adventure or zombie apocalypse or kids on bikes. And they're all different. You're going to have a far, far different approach with cosmic horror than you would a slasher film. And I don't think there's that kind of depth in that. Now, I already mentioned we've got that Shiver Gothic that's available. At least I know it's in PDF. And we've got that Kickstarter for slasher and blockbuster editions. I don't know if those are core books themselves or if they're just supplements, because in essence, the rules are only 27 pages. So I would not be shocked if they're actually full-fledged core rule books that focus on those genres. I don't see a huge issue with the custom dice. They don't really feel gimmicky. They actually feel part of the mechanics. And as I mentioned before, there are games out there that utilize custom dice that when you're looking through the rules, you just feel, wow, you're only doing this so you can sell these dice. I didn't really get that impression about Shiver and Parable Games going through the rule book itself. Now, do want to point out, I wish that the dice conversion chart was more intuitive. And I got to point out, that page didn't load when I went to the dice roller. And it may have been a once in a lifetime thing, but I do have to mention it. And I do have to ding Shiver for it, because Shiver really promotes itself as, well, you don't have to buy our dice. You can use the online die roller, or dice roller, I should say. And it did work today when I went and took a peek. Problem is, if I was a game master and players and I was looking to play when I went and checked it and it didn't work, that's a problem. I'm not dinging it hugely for it, but I am dinging Shiver's review score because of that too. All in all, I do like Shiver. I think if you approach it as something for one shots and short campaigns, convention games, I think you will really enjoy this. You'll be disappointed if you're looking to replace your Call of Cthulhu with a rules lighter version of it. This just doesn't have that kind of depth available to it for longer campaigns. On a scale of 0 to 10, I give the Shiver role playing game a 7 out of 10. I will mention, and I don't say this very often, but your mileage is certainly going to vary with Shiver. Some people, it is going to be just exactly what they're looking for. Other folks, it's probably going to come up pretty short of what they're looking for. Me personally, I like it. It just would not be my go-to role-playing game if I were looking to do long-form horror adventure campaigns. All right, that is it for this time out. If you like this video, by all means, please give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel if you haven't already, and if you do subscribe, ding that bell. It will not only let you know when I upload videos such as this review, it'll also inform you when my live stream, the Gaming Gang Dispatch, airs Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. Central, right here on YouTube. Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy life to watch this video. And until I see you next time, here's hoping each and every one of you get to enjoy plenty of great gaming with your gang. Oh, hey, you're still here. Well, that's okay. You don't have to leave just yet. In fact, why don't you subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel right here, or take a peek at the latest live stream, or even find out what YouTube recommends you check out from the channel. And of course, I'm Jeff McAleer. Thanks again for watching.